You come out in the morning and the guest spot is empty. Not your car moved, your car gone. Or you're about to park a visitor there and something makes you check first, which is the better version of this story. Either way, the question is the same. Can they actually do that? The answer is usually yes, they can, but only if a specific set of conditions were met first, and in a surprising number of cases, they weren't. This episode is about which conditions those are, because that is the difference between a tow you have to accept and a tow you can challenge and sometimes get reimbursed for. Start with the distinction that decides most of this. A guest spot is common area, property the association manages on behalf of everyone. So yes, the association generally does have authority over it. That is genuinely different from your own driveway, where several states have limited what an association can do and where courts have been skeptical of associations reaching onto individually owned land. But having authority over the spot is not the same as being allowed to tow from it at will. Towing from private property is regulated by state statute, and those statutes attach conditions. Signage, notice, consistency. Each one is a place where an association can get it wrong, and each one is a place where they routinely do. Most guest parking rules run on a clock, and the usual range is 24 to 72 consecutive hours. Note that word, consecutive. In many communities, moving the vehicle restarts the count, which is why the enforcement fight so often comes down to whether anyone can prove the car sat there continuously. Plenty of associations also layer on a permit, a hanging pass, or an online registration portal. Here is the part worth checking before you accept a violation. The limit has to actually exist in the governing documents or in a rule that was properly adopted. A number that a manager has simply always used, that appears in no recorded document, is not automatically enforceable. And asking to see where it is written is a perfectly reasonable first question. If you remember one thing, remember this. Under California's private property towing statute, an association that has posted compliant signage at each entrance to the property may have a vehicle towed without giving that vehicle's owner any individual warning at all. Compliant is doing real work in that sentence. The statute specifies where signs go, what they must say, and what information about the towing company they must carry. A sign that is missing, hidden behind a hedge, at only one of 3 entrances, or missing required content is not compliant. So the single most useful thing you can do, before a tow and certainly after one, is photograph every entrance. That photograph is the whole case. When the signage isn't there or isn't compliant, the association generally can't simply call a truck. It has to give notice of the violation and then wait, and reported waiting periods commonly run up to about 96 hours. That is 4 days, which is a long time compared with how these tows usually feel, sudden. So if your car went in the morning after a notice appeared the night before and there is no compliant sign at the entrance, those two facts together are a genuine problem for the association. One caution, this is an area where cities and counties layer their own ordinances on top of state law, and a municipal rule can be stricter. Check your city, not only your state. Here is the decision tree the association is supposed to be walking through. First, is the vehicle creating a safety problem, blocking a fire lane, a hydrant, an access route? If yes, essentially everywhere permits an immediate tow, and that is the end of the analysis. If no, the next question is whether compliant signage is posted at every entrance. If it is, a tow can generally proceed without warning you personally. If it isn't, notice and a waiting period come first. And running alongside all of it is a question that applies no matter which branch you land on. Was this rule enforced the same way against everyone, or only against you? Side by side, the two worlds look like this. With compliant signage, no individual warning is generally required, and the tow can happen immediately on violation. Your evidence has to be that the signage itself fails the statute. Without compliant signage, a notice is generally required first, and the association has to wait. So your evidence is the absence of that notice and the timeline of what happened when. And across both columns, one row does not change. A vehicle blocking a fire lane or emergency access can be towed immediately regardless. That exception is not a loophole associations invented. It exists for obvious reasons, and it is not worth fighting. If the signage is compliant and the notice was proper, you are not out of arguments. Associations are generally required to enforce their rules consistently, and parking is where inconsistency is most visible and easiest to document. If the same 3 vehicles have sat in guest spots for weeks and yours went in 26 hours, that is not a feeling. It is a pattern, and a pattern you can evidence with dated photographs and with the association's own enforcement records, which most states give you a right to inspect. Of everything in this episode, this is the argument that tends to hold up best, because it does not require the association to have broken a towing statute. It only requires them to have been unfair in a way you can show. If it is already gone, the order of operations matters. Retrieve the vehicle first, storage fees accrue daily, and no argument you win later is improved by letting it sit. Then, the same day, photograph every entrance. Signage has a way of appearing shortly after a disputed tow, and a photograph taken today is worth far more than a description given next month. Then ask the association in writing for the written authorization for the tow and the rule it relied on. And know that this is not purely academic. California's statute and others provide remedies where a vehicle was towed improperly, which is precisely why the association's paperwork is worth demanding. Be realistic about proportion. A single tow with modest storage fees may not be worth a lawyer's hourly rate, but it is very often worth a small claims filing, which is a forum built for exactly this size of dispute and which you can use without representation in most states. Where it does justify escalating is when the same conflict keeps happening, when the sums have grown, or when the association simply refuses a written request for the records that would settle it. That refusal is itself a problem in most states, and it tends to be the point where an association that has been casual about procedure starts paying attention. So, what to carry away? A guest spot is common area, and the association generally does have authority over it, unlike your own driveway. What decides whether they can tow without warning you is compliant signage at every entrance, and compliant is a statutory test, not an opinion. Without it, notice and a waiting period generally come first. A vehicle blocking a fire lane or emergency access is an immediate tow in essentially every state and is not worth contesting. And the single most useful thing you can do costs nothing and takes 5 minutes. Walk to each entrance of your community today and photograph the signs or the absence of them. If a tow ever happens, that is the evidence you will wish you had. Sources are on screen and listed in full in the description. This is general education, not legal advice. Towing authority, signage rules, notice periods and guest parking limits vary by state, by city, and by your own governing documents. And this area changes more often than most. If your car has already been towed and the amount matters to you, the written breakdown and the dispute letter templates are linked below. And the first step is always the photographs.